On December 9th, Xi Jinping made a trip to Saudi Arabia with speculation that he aimed to persuade the Saudi crown prince to abandon the US as a partner and instead align with China's agenda to eliminate the US dollar as the global reserve currency. This visit, along with many others, forms part of the CCP strategy to become the world's dominant superpower. To achieve this objective, the CCP seeks to undermine the dollar's position as the world's strongest currency. In today's video, we will discuss why the CCP harbors animosity towards the dollar's influence and how it intends to erode its dominance. How the dollar became the world's reserve currency. To comprehend why the dollar is a dominant force, it's necessary to trace its origins as the world's reserve currency. Prior to World War I, the British pound was the reserve currency, backed by gold, as the UK had the most potent economy. However, the destruction of European economies, including the UK, during both world wars enabled the US economy to expand rapidly and amass significant gold reserves. After World War II, the US had control of over 75% of the world's gold reserves, giving the US government significant leverage. Capitalizing on this power, the US government hosted the Bretton Woods Conference, where it convinced many major countries to fix their currencies to the US dollar, which was in turn fixed to gold. While many people cite the Bretton Woods Conference as evidence that the US attained its status as the world's reserve currency by exploiting struggling economies after both world wars, this notion is unfounded. In reality, countries were not coerced into signing the Bretton Woods Agreement. They did so because it was mutually beneficial. The US was the most robust economy and therefore the most stable, leading other countries to feel at ease in fixing their currencies to the US dollar. This move brought stability and facilitated trade across borders, making it easier for businesses to operate and leading to a quicker rebuilding process in the aftermath of the war. Moreover, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the International Monetary Fund or IMF and the World Bank. The IMF was responsible for overseeing all currency exchange rates and helping countries maintain their peg to the US dollar. Conversely, the World Bank provided loans to countries to facilitate post-war recovery efforts. In light of these developments, it is clear that the US played a significant role in assisting countries in rebuilding after the World Wars, which explained why these countries agreed to the Bretton Woods Agreement. While the Bretton Woods Agreement was instrumental in facilitating post-war recovery efforts, its sustainability became increasingly questionable as the US began to spend more on domestic programs and foreign wars. Eventually, it became apparent that the peg to gold was unsustainable in the long term. As a result, in 1971, US President Richard Nixon temporarily suspended the redemption of the dollar for gold. This pause was never lifted, effectively taking the dollar off the gold standard. Despite the dollar not being pegged to gold, the US remained the strongest economy. However, for the dollar to continue as the world's reserve currency, there needed to be significant demand for the currency, ensuring its market price remained stable. Otherwise, large transactions could significantly impact the price, complicating international trade. As a result, rather than relying on gold, the US government decided to create a demand for the dollar through oil, which many argue is even more valuable than gold in today's economy. World War II demonstrated to every nation the critical importance of oil in the future. Saudi Arabia, which possessed the world's largest oil field, struck it rich. However, the post-war Middle East became unstable due to this newfound wealth, causing the Saudi monarchy to feel uneasy. In 1974, the Saudi government reached an agreement with the United States, the world's most powerful military, to sell oil exclusively in US dollars. In exchange, the US pledged to provide weapons and ensure their security. After Saudi Arabia's decision, other OPEC nations also opted to trade oil in US dollars. As OPEC is one of the world's largest oil producers, the demand for US dollars grew in tandem with the rising demand for oil in the ensuing decades. Most of the world's oil was bought using US dollars, which necessitated countries to purchase and hold dollars in their reserves to ensure they could always purchase oil for their citizens. Here, you can see that the US dollar is the largest foreign reserve held by countries worldwide, providing benefits for the United States. However, before discussing these benefits, let's move on to the second part of the Saudi-US deal that significantly impacted the US economy. The Saudi-US deal. Apart from agreeing to sell oil in US dollars, the Saudi crown also made a significant commitment that is often overlooked. They pledged to invest their surplus oil profits in US treasuries. This action led other countries to follow suit, resulting in an increased demand for US debt securities. This deal not only boosted demand for the US dollar, but also helped the US government raise debt easily, contributing to significant economic growth over the years. The benefits of having a dollar as the world's reserve currency are not limited to the domestic level. It gives the US significant leverage internationally, since the demand for the dollar makes it the most stable currency, causing more countries to adopt it for trade. Additionally, it allows the US to impose sanctions on countries that are unfriendly to it, such as Iran, North Korea, or, most recently, Russia. The US can also freeze other countries' reserves because many countries hold most of their reserves in US treasuries. This was demonstrated in the case of Russia when it invaded Ukraine. China's campaign for yuan's reserve currency status. The US dollar has enormous influence both domestically and internationally, as it is the world's reserve currency. This power allows the US government to impose sanctions and freeze reserves of countries that go against their interests. The impact of the dollar is so significant that banks worldwide must adhere to US rules to stay in the financial sector. While China aims to possess similar power and influence, it recognizes that many countries are uncomfortable with the dollar's dominance. Therefore, China attempts to promote the use of the yuan to gain more leverage in global trade. Following the Western sanctions on Russia, China and Russia's trade has primarily been conducted in yuan. China has been using its loans to developing countries as a means to encourage the usage of yuan in trade. Now, China is leveraging the same tactic to increase the utilization of yuan by necessitating countries to repay their loans in yuan. This approach can be highly effective if prosperous, as more than 140 countries are currently involved in China's Belt and Road Initiative, and if they all agree to use the yuan more, it can undoubtedly provide the currency with more stability. China, being the world's largest exporter, has a significant number of countries importing goods from it. This is a map displaying the countries that primarily import from China, indicating the potential for the Chinese government to persuade even a portion of these countries to adopt the yuan for trade, thus creating significant implications for the dollar's global status. This is the reason Xi Jinping's visit to Saudi Arabia aims to increase the use of the yuan for trade, which can have implications for the dollar status. The US-Saudi relations have been rocky lately, as the US is getting too friendly with Iran, among other issues. President Biden visited the Crown Prince to ensure OPEC won't cut oil production, but OPEC announced a major cut in oil production before the midterms, causing tension. Following the production cuts, President Biden warned that there would be repercussions for Saudi Arabia for making such a decision during a time of global economic uncertainty. Additionally, there has been renewed discussion about passing the No Oil Producing and Exporting Cartels Act, or NOPEC, which would allow the US to sue leaders of oil-producing countries within the OPEC cartel. Showing their disapproval, Saudis have hinted at the possibility of selling their oil in a currency other than the dollar, which has prompted China to step in with an offer to use the yuan instead. If Xi Jinping is successful in persuading the Saudis to accept the yuan, it could have significant implications for China's goal of undermining the dollar's dominance. So, will China replace the US as the world's reserve currency if Xi Jinping persuades Saudi Arabia to accept the yuan instead of the dollar? Not necessarily. Let me explain. Many countries are uncomfortable with another nation holding too much power over them, which is understandable. This is not necessarily an anti-US sentiment, but rather a natural human response to feeling uneasy when someone else has too much control over one's future. In a hypothetical scenario where every country switches to using the yuan, it doesn't really solve the issue. China would now have the same power that the US held, and most countries would prefer dealing with the US having that power rather than China. This is because the Chinese government has a history of manipulating their currency, punishing countries for questioning their actions, and being opaque with their plans for the future. Therefore, the chances of replacing the dollar as a reserve currency with the yuan are low, and if it does happen, it would most likely be a basket of currencies that replace the dollar rather than the yuan alone. But what do you think? Will China successfully dethrone the US dollar from its status as the world's reserve currency? Comment your thoughts below. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to stay up to date with our latest uploads.